Thank you again for being here, and to our panelists. This is sort of our dream panel. Like when Elisa and I were like, who should we get to be on this panel? Basically, this was our dream team, and everyone said yes, so thank you. So anyway, I was talking to Elisa beforehand. I was like, are we going to introduce the panelists? And we decided we should let them introduce themselves because they have all done so many things that I don't want to miss what they think is the most important thing to tell you. So we'll start with Debbie.
So yes, Debbie McNulty. My current role is Senior Vice President at Mid-America Arts Alliance, and I will be there in about 2 years in July. And I have colleagues here tonight, Epishad, Taylor, pseudo-colleague, Arts Connect, and our Artist Services Division, so that's really nice. And so Mid-America, we are one of 6 regional service organizations in the United States. If you don't know what a regional is, we work with states in our regions closely with the state arts agencies and the federal government, as well as municipal partners and private foundations to bring more art to all people. That's really our mission. We have a big specialty in professional development, which is a longtime partnership with Fresh Arts in Houston, but also all around the United States and the region. So while we are one of 6 regionals, we also work nationally. So it could be services, it's grants, it's networking, peer facilitating, working with communities to elevate what they're trying to do, like their own arts and culture aspirations locally, working with funders to reach communities they want. We have a deadline Friday, I think, for craft guilds. We had a funder come to us who was really interested in preserving craft legacies and craft traditions, and so we have that grant. So midamerica.org, Deborah, DEBORAH, at MAAA.org. There's a lot of information on our website. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. I think if you hear something that I say about whatever we're talking about and want to reach out, please do. And then if I don't know the answer, I can connect you with the right person within our organization. But yeah, I think that's enough.
Thanks, Debbie. So my name is Fleurette Fernando. I am the director of the Arts Leadership Program at the University of Houston. Go Cougs! Yeah, baby, go Cougs! I have been in that role for the last 13 years. Previous to that role, or this role that I'm in right now, I was the director of grants at Houston Arts Alliance, and that's where I became very familiar with David Ling and Debbie McNulty. We used to go to conferences, we used to hang out, we were all lateral peers, it was wonderful. Those were the glory days. And a little bit about UH and the Arts Leadership Program. It is essentially, it's a master's program, so it's an MA program, graduate level program. And it's an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary program, meaning my students come to me from all arts disciplines, right? So they have undergraduate degrees in theater, music, dance, visual art, creative writing. Sometimes I get a business major. Sometimes I get, somebody from sociology or history, but they all have a desire to understand better the business, management, administrative side of the arts. And so I feel really lucky to have built this program and to be teaching in this program. I teach leadership, I teach strategic planning. I also supervise the practicum placement. So every student has to do a 300-hour real-world practicum placement. So I've had students at Fresh Arts, I've had students at Mid-America Arts Alliance, I've had students at Art League. It's been great because I'm able to see sort of the new wave of leadership, but also connect my students to established leaders, mostly in the city, but a lot of my students end up all over the nation and now all over the world. So it's been really, really rewarding in that way. We also have 3 certificate programs that are housed in the Arts Leadership Program, one in museum and gallery management, one in arts and health, which is a new field that's really expanding across the world. And of course, Houston has a lot of wonderful opportunities in that capacity because of our amazing medical center and our amazing arts community. And we are just launching this summer a brand new certificate in film and media production and leadership. Yeah. So what we're really trying to do with that small certificate program is to build the next wave of producers, right? So people who really understand the business and management side of film and television. Because as many of you may know, Texas Bill, Senate Bill 22 passed a few months ago, which is, yes, money to incentivize more film, narrative film and television production in Texas. So we want to make sure that that money comes to Houston and doesn't just get sucked up by Taylor Sheridan in Dallas and Austin filmmakers and South by Southwest. So we're really going to try to position ourselves as players in that capacity. I come from a theater and dance background. I have an MFA in theater directing. I started off as a dancer, and so I really feel like my experience professionally has been across the board as an individual artist, as a leader of nonprofit arts organizations, as a grant maker, and now as an educator. So I'm looking forward to our discussion tonight.
And you said this program
Yes.
built from scratch.
Yes.
Zero.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. She does my PR for free also. Yes, I mean, it was really an idea that the University of Houston had, and that leaders like Debbie McNulty and people who were working in the capacity of making grants and serving as funders really felt that there was a need for formal education in that space, because we were doing a lot of education, right, as grant makers, talking to artists, talking to nonprofit leaders about the details of running a business, essentially, running a nonprofit organization. And so we realized that this was something that needed a formal program, graduate program. So the university did have an idea about it and a framework for it. But I remember I started my job in April, and then we had our first class in August with 7 students. So we had just a couple of months to advertise it. And so I'm proud of the fact that the students that have graduated from this program have created their own community, and they support each other, they help each other find work, they come together to commiserate about whatever it is they're going through professionally and personally. And so I just feel really lucky to be part of this next wave of young people moving into this work. So thanks, Debbie. Thanks for the shout out.
Hello? Hello? Don. I don't know how to follow that energetic intro. So I for one, where I find connection in that is I wish that program had existed when I was at U of H. So I've been with Fresh Arts for over 15 years. I'm entering my 15th year with the organization, and I actually started as an intern. I was the oldest intern that the organization had ever seen. I had graduated from U of H with what did I graduate in? Art history, studio arts minor, not knowing what to do with it, not understanding the business side, or knowing that I didn't understand so much of what it meant to be an artist or in the arts. And so 15 years ago, I met Space Taker. Our organization was called Space Taker back in the day, and now we're Fresh Arts. And so I've grown with the organization over the past 15 years, from intern to everything in between. And so I'm now entering my 5th year as executive director, and I've learned so much. So I honestly don't even feel qualified enough to be on this panel, but I will give you everything that I've learned and that I've learned the hard way. But if you're not familiar with Fresh Arts, we are an arts service organization, Houston-focused, Houston-based, serving mostly individual artists and creatives, creative business owners, also small arts organizations. We sponsor almost 30 fiscally sponsored projects. So everything from visual arts, zine festivals and murals and small theater groups, a little bit of everything. And so with that, we do work with a lot of arts administrators who wear multiple hats and are also artists themselves. And so our programs are everything from professional development in partnership with Mid-America Arts Alliance. We host Artist Inc. Houston. This year will be our 9th year for the program. The application will be opening very shortly. And it's an 8-week program of 25 artists that meet once a week for 8 weeks and grow and learn and build community with each other. And aside from that, we also offer ongoing workshops and online resources. We have an opportunity board. So if any of you have opportunities, if you're looking for interns, volunteers, you have employment opportunities, you can share that with Fresh Arts, and we can post it on our opportunity board and share it through our resource newsletter. And we do a ton of other things, but I think I'll keep it short and sweet there, and I'll pass it on to Jennie.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I don't know how to follow these like 3 amazing women, but my name is Jennie, and I'm the Executive Director at Art League Houston. We're an organization that is actually celebrating its 78th anniversary this year, so almost 80. And our mission is to connect the community through diverse, dynamic, and creative experiences that essentially bring people together to see, make, and talk about contemporary visual art. We are focused on reimagining the traditional Art League model to sort of foster a radical imagination and make sure that all of our programs impact positive social change. And so we have 3 sort of main areas of focus. So we have an exhibition and public art program. So we have 3 on-site galleries. So we support artists that are local, from out of town, emerging, established. We have a contemporary Texas history project where we honor Texas artists and basically work with them on an exhibition and a publication. We also do public art projects across the city. We had the pleasure of working with Debbie when she was in the mayor's office doing a citywide public art project where we did a single public art project in each of Houston's 11 city council districts. So it was quite an undertaking, but a lot of fun. We also have an on-site art school. So we offer classes from drawing to ceramics, painting. And so one of the things that we're focused on is trying to remove barriers to access with the arts. So we've started a pay what you can program in the school. So that really allows people to determine their own economic situation and be able to access arts maybe for the first time since high school. And then we also have a community program that serves a K through grade audience, which is a term that Epichard in the back coined, so I have to give her credit. But essentially we work with Title I schools in HISD that lack any art resources and deploy teaching artists into those schools. And so they come up with workshops that sort of help either with integration of whatever subject they're working with, or it can help with social emotional learning. And then we have a Skillshare program. So we basically offer workshops to educators. It started specifically with educators in HISD and teaching them different art workshops that they can actually deploy in their own classrooms. Because a lot of times the teachers are actually like math teachers or science teachers, and so they wanted to be able to have some tools that they could take back to their classroom. And then we also have a healing arts program where we offer free art classes to artists with chronic illness and disability, and that program has been going on for 35 years. And so artists meet every Friday and they basically work on artwork. We provide we provide supplies, we provide the teaching artists. We have like different visiting artists, so they're introduced to new types of medium, and then they have a big exhibition every year. So we just had their big celebratory exhibition a couple of weeks ago. And then we also have a summer teen intensive program, which runs through the summer. And so basically it's specifically for supporting kids at high schools that, again, lack arts access. And so it's not really necessarily trying to be an HSPVA and like prepare people for like, college portfolio reviews. A lot of times it's like really just making sure that there's some arts access for these teens, and then they get to decide whether this is something that they want to do. And so we introduce them to many different organizations across town to sort of open up the possibilities of how you can participate in the arts beyond being just a practicing artist. And so that's just a quick run through of everything that we do. And big shout out to David for suggesting me.
All right, thank you. So we're going to get started. We have essentially two general topics we're going to talk about tonight. The first one is boards, board development, who should be on your board, why. And then the second section is more about development and fundraising. So of the people who are here tonight, how many of you are board members? And how many of you are staff at an organization or founders or executive? Okay. So we got a good spread. And some of you are both, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, cool. So like I said, we're going to get started on talking about board stuff. My questions are on my phone. I promise I'm not texting. So I want to start with Jennie on the end, and anyone feel free to chime in. I'm going to start with you. What makes a good board member? Who are the best board members?
That's a great question. So I would say with the organization the size of Art League, our budget is just over $1 million. And so we have a board currently of 15. And so in terms of what makes a good board member, we're looking for people that are going to be very active and they're going to be consistent. And they're also going to be able to have a skill set that's going to be able to help us progress with our strategic goals. So the organization did a strategic plan in 2022. And so we came up with 3 priorities with that. One of which is reimagining our campus. We've outgrown the facility that we're in Montrose. And so we're really looking for board members that are going to be able to open doors and also fundraise. I think that's been a big thing. And one helpful thing just in terms of identifying board members is we've created like an open call application process. So there's like an online application that interested board members have to fill out. And it asks about their background. Have they served on any other boards? Like what neighborhoods are they connected to? What communities are they connected to? What's their skill set? And so we internally do a board matrix. So sort of looking at all the skill sets that we have on the board. And then that helps us figure out where the gaps are essentially. And then we're able to look at the folks that submit the applications and essentially do some matchmaking.
Thank you. You can pass it down.
Me next. I should see a copy of your application. We started doing a board application a couple years ago, and that has honestly been a really big game changer for us, is finding or attracting board members that want to be in our inner circle, that feel like they have a strong understanding of what we do, and they feel connected and compelled, if anything, to want to serve and support. And reading through the applications, it has made the process, I think, easier for me because I get to read these applications and they're pouring their heart out, and I'm getting to hear about all these folks who were involved in the arts many years ago and then went down a different path. And I mean, I know all about that. And they're finding their chance to be able to connect back with, that little inner artist in them. And they themselves are able to present themselves in a way that they see how they could support us. They see themselves in the organization, and that has made it it's made all the difference in being able to understand and see a pathway for them, and already knowing, before one of those awkward coffee meetings where it feels like a first date, it doesn't feel like a first date anymore. It feels like you're meeting an old friend, and it has helped to be able to bring them onto the board a bit smoother. And so I've really enjoyed that process. And so I would say for us, it's about finding those silent cheerleaders and finding ways for them to not be so silent.
Thank you. And y'all can answer the same question, but I also have a different question for you. What do you think, be involved in the ways that you are with your organizations, is the right size for a board? Because legally speaking, you have to have a minimum of 3 board members, but technically there's no maximum. So Fleurette and Debbie, I'm interested. If you have something to add to those answers, please do, but I'm curious in your take on that.
Okay. Well, is this on?
It is.
Oh, okay. I'm doing my theater voice anyways with the mic in my hand. One of my students just walked in the room. That's Dylan Anderson. She's going to be graduating on Saturday. So if anybody has questions about the program from a student's perspective, you can talk to Dylan after this session. So, I think it depends on the size of the organization and the level of activity on the organization. I feel like a sweet spot for a mid-size organization is probably around that 12 to 15 mark. Maybe if you're a larger organization and have a lot of moving parts, or you have some kind of special initiative going on, you're about to embark on a capital campaign or a very large strategic plan, you might want to buffer that number with a few more members. The thing is that, we always have this thought that more is better, bigger is better. And that's not always the case, because for an executive director to have to wrangle 20, 25, 30 board members, I mean, just to get meetings, just to get, momentum, just to get consensus can be exhausting for an executive director if there's too many people. Now, mind you, if all of those people are engaged and they're committed and they're working hard, then fantastic, right? And if you're a large institution like the ballet or the symphony or whatever, 25, 30 plus, board size would make sense. But I think when we're talking about these sort of smaller and mid-sized organizations, I would say a 10, 12, 15 size group is probably reasonable in terms of, I know that the word diversity is a taboo word for us right now, but I'm going to use it anyways, not just as it pertains to race and gender, but also diversity in terms of skill set, right? So you are going to want to really think about curating or designing your board based on the needs that your organization has. And again, for every organization, it's different. But if you're doing a lot of work in a specific community, having representation from that community on your board is probably a good idea. If you're doing a lot of, contract work and legal, which we all do in some capacity, having a great lawyer like Aaron Rodgers on your board would be a good idea. Having an accountant, having someone who's in politics, having somebody who has certain kinds of skill sets that maybe your staff is at capacity with. So maybe you need more marketing help, or maybe you need more design help, or maybe you need, obviously we always need more development and fundraising work, but there are other types of skills that I think board members can bring to the table that are really valuable. So again, I feel like you want to right size it based on the volume of work, and also right size it based on the skill sets that you need at the board level that maybe your staff can't totally cover. So I hope that answers the question.
I mean, she said it all, right? She's so smart and so wise. I would add just to the being on the same page with your board, requires, touch points, communication, contact. So how many of those relationships can you as an executive director manage at one time with everything you have going on? Because if everybody is on the same page, like who you are as an organization and you know where you want to go, then you're able to kind of row in the same direction, and your board members are out there and able to make those networking relationships, open doors, because you all are aligned. But that does take time, right? I've been on boards where I was handed a piece of paper, here's our mission, go be a board member. And so it's okay, what do I do now? So I think that obviously falls on the CEO. And then, diversity of life experience and diversity of network. I had a board once where, you do, okay, who should we bring onto the board? And people recommend people they know and their friends, which is fine, which is a great way to get people to come to your stuff. It's number one reason people go to things is someone they know invited them, right? And the same thing with board services, but you just want to make sure that you're also tapping the resources when it comes to fundraising from that one network. They all have the same friends. So I think, thinking about that, and I really think different life experiences is so valuable, because as an organization, the more diversity of thought, of experience you have in the room, you're going to make better decisions, right? Because you're going to be able to look at it from so many different points of view. So I think that's the only thing I would add.
I'll keep it with you. What do you think about advisory boards? Is that a thing that you recommend, that you've worked with?
I think we've had some, I've had some friends of experiences, which isn't really an advisory board. I think other folks on here have like artists and exhibition advisory boards. That's probably more in that, but I like the friends of as a way to cultivate board members, like bring people up and actually like, okay, someone has their terms up, you can't put them anywhere else, but they can go back to be on the friends of group. So you keep people engaged. So I kind of like that a little bit, but I'll let somebody else speak to the actual advisory boards.
Well, at Art League, we have an amazing artist advisory board, and we have a member here, Eleonora. Woo! And they essentially function as our creative think tank, and they help us make programming decisions. And so it's been great in terms of being able to get that diversity of thought into everything that we're doing, so we're not doing anything in a vacuum. I will say that the Artist Advisory Board is completely separate to our governing board of directors, and that was by design originally, but over the first couple of years, it felt a little siloed, and so we actually ended up making the chair of the Artist Advisory Board a voting board member on the governing board, and that sort of like helped break up that silo and connect the two groups. And so I think that's been really helpful. And I think one thing that we're trying to explore is an advisory committee that we can basically fill with past board members. So because we have plans to want to build a new campus, potentially do a capital campaign sometime in the future, and we are nearing our 80th anniversary, we really want to be able to look back and engage with folks that have been engaged with the organization over that 80-year period. And so I think having an advisory board would help them be engaged, and then they can also serve as sort of, they'll have institutional knowledge, and then they can also serve as mentors for our current board members, because a lot of our board members are first-time board members, and so I think there's a mentorship opportunity there as well.
I love the board mentor idea. Fresh Arts, we have an artist advisory committee, and we have one of our new members here. Thank you for being here. We've had artist advisory committees over the years. It sort of went silent during COVID, and so we've been bringing it back. And so similarly, we are bridging the artist advisory committee with our board. And so we have, just as of this year, our artist advisory chair also sits on the board. And so that's a new development. And we recently completed our strategic plan. We're looking to see how we can further empower the artist advisory committee to be another strong support system, and that tie-in with the board is just the start of that. So we're looking forward to seeing how this artist advisory committee sees themselves being able to embed them into the foundation of the organization, but then also serve as important pathways for board leadership or just organizational experience. And I've served on an advisory committee for another organization that I'm now on the board for. And so for me, that experience was really great to be able to also dip my toes into what the organization does on an organizational level and how different folks support that. And so they picked me out of the advisory group, and now I'm on the board. So I think it can be great for sort of both ways.
So right now, I'm a board member on the Houston Cinema Arts Society board, and one of my former students, who's an alum, Katie Cregan-Rios, she's the executive director, and super proud of her because she's done some amazing work, and she has really found a way to utilize and empower this advisory board that she's created. And one of the things I think she's done well with that advisory board is stack it with emerging leaders. So of course I'm an educator, so I'm always going to have this sort of, bias around this, but I think the opportunity to, as many of you said, train up future board members through an advisory group that may consist of, younger leaders, emerging leaders who are just kind of learning the ropes. And they can also be a really great source for volunteers, right? So if you can activate your advisory board to do all kinds of other activity that maybe your board wouldn't be able to do. They don't have the voting rights and the sort of responsibility of board members, but they're sort of like that outer circle or that second tier of people that you can tap into. And so I think that there's a lot of great ways. And here's another thing. In Houston Cinema Arts Society, Katie has a couple of board members, advisory board members, that are people like Bun B, right? So Bun B is not necessarily going to be able to, do all of the, heavy lifting that a board member can, but every once in a while, she'll be able to tap into him to moderate a panel or be at an event or just lend his name to some kind of an activity that's going on and engage him in different kinds of ways. And that because he has that advisory board, title, she's able to kind of, leverage that. So that's another way of thinking about your advisory board. They may be names in the community or other kinds of people that have access or, whatever it is that you may need, but don't have the time commitment to be at all of the board meetings or, serve on committees, etc. So I think it's a great idea, and depending on what your organization needs and what the vision of your executive director is, you can really kind of mobilize that advisory board to help you in different capacities.
Fleurette, I'm going to throw a question at you that's not on the list.
Oh, gosh. Curveball. All right. There.
So you mentioned that diversity is a taboo word in this country right now. It's not a taboo word in this room. So I am curious what you would suggest are ways to bring on different board members, because traditionally boards may have looked a certain way. Less so in Houston. I think we're pretty good at that. But what do you think, or anyone, about how to reach out to other communities who may not have been involved with the organization prior?
I really think that mission alignment, we've talked about that, is paramount, right? And I think making the case for what your mission is to people of, diverse backgrounds, different parts of the community. But I think what's also most important before you even get into that business is making sure that your organization has connection to those diverse groups that you want representation from, right? So I think it has to be a mutually beneficial relationship. I know as a woman of color working in higher ed, especially during and after COVID, it was like every diversity task force, every anti-racism task force, you were tapped into that, right? You were asked to serve in so many different capacities, and it's difficult sometimes because on one level you feel like you're really spread thin, but on another level you think to yourself, well, if I don't serve, who is, right? And so I think it's really important that when you're tapping into diverse communities, that before you get into that business, that you're asking yourself, is my organization serving those communities? Would these people have a connection to this work and an interest in this work and be able to serve with their heart and soul and professionalism and time? Are they going to be able to bring that service back to their community? So it shouldn't be a one-way street. So I think that before tapping into people and individuals and communities, I think as leaders in our organizations, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that I'm doing? How is my mission actually serving these various communities that I'm now asking these representatives to be a part of?
I was just to say, look at your professional network, and if it doesn't look the way you want it to look, then show up where people are. Like, go out and take the first step and be in whatever community you're interested in. But that, I think, is like giving of yourself to other folks and what they're trying to achieve, and build relationships that way. I think is a way then to think about, okay, now do we want to work together on something?
Because you want to avoid, tokenism, I mean, like, that's an old school word, but, I think we all understand what that means. You really want to avoid, I think, that. And there was a time where there was this real push, in nonprofit arts organizations, your board needs to have this much, percentage of this and percent. Yeah, check. And how, on one level, I understand that, was a way of sort of pushing the the mission of diversifying leadership in our organizations. But at the same time, you don't want it to be just like, window dressing, right? You want there to be that a relationship and a genuine give and take, right? When you're bringing people into the fold, when you're bringing people into the inner circle. So I think as leaders, we just have to constantly be mindful of that we're not just sort of creating diversity for diversity's sake, but that there's something deeper as to why people are being asked to serve, because it's a huge commitment. If you are really working as an effective board member, even if you only meet once a month or whatever it is, you're doing quite a bit of work, volunteer work for the most part, right? And so you want to be really respectful of people's time and expertise and energy and creativity, no matter who you ask, right, to serve on your board.
Y'all can answer that question if you want to, but those were great answers. Thank you for accepting my surprise question. I'm going to ask one more question about board stuff, and then I want to move on to the funding, because with our special expertise here, I think we can get a lot of good answers on that. Angela, what is your onboarding board procedure? Do you have a board member agreement? What do board members know going into working with Fresh Arts?
I've been working on all of that. So I was able to inherit all of those sort of mechanisms. So we've got our board agreements, and I will just also note that I'm really proud that during the last 5 years, we've really been able to have a truly diverse board in so many different ways. We were looking at it from demographics. I inherited a not very diverse board. It was also mostly males. We had 2 females, and I will say now it's flipped. We have a mostly female board. So if there's any males out there that want to serve on the Fresh Arts Board, we're trying to get a little bit more of a balance there. But so I was able to inherit the organization with really great structures already in place for onboarding new board members. So I've just been building from that. I've created I'm constantly evolving each year that we're onboarding board members. I'm like, how can I improve upon this? How can I fully give them all the information and tools and truly empower them so that they can come in and like hit the ground running, and what information would I need? And the organization, we do a lot, and especially if you're not an artist, you may not be super well in tune with everything that we do. And so I recognize that there's an education piece. So we do a board onboarding session where I walk through all of the things, the agreements, the bylaws. Now there's a pretty snazzy, I will say, digital board guidebook that I've created. And I've tried to make it super engaging with little icons. I mean, I'm really proud of it. Share it with everyone. There's like maps and photos, and I have a visual arts background, so I really worked hard on it. So that is my way to try to really bring them into the fold and give them the lay of the land. Here's all the information. Here's who to contact. Here's our org chart. Here's how to find us. Here's how to contact us and make an appointment, and here's everything about our programs and the impact. Do you want the long version? Do you want the short version? Do you want an infographic? I kind of have it all. I'm trying to cater to all of the different brains. So that's been our onboarding process. That, and we do an annual North Star retreat instead of a formal first quarter board meeting. And we do an info session with the orientation with the new board members, and then we bring in the other board members. And so far, that dynamic has worked really well, because we're entering the year with what are our goals and aligning everybody on that, so everyone is starting on the same foot. And I feel like the new board members have really taken to that.
Thank you. Jennie, same question.
I love that North Star annual meeting. That's such a great idea. So our onboarding process is definitely always being developed, but essentially we have a board agreement. And so I think the biggest thing that I've learned is just managing expectations. I feel like if everybody understands their role, things can be a lot more impactful and successful. And there was a professional development program that I was a part of, actually, that was run by Mid-America Arts Alliance and funded by Houston Endowment, called Engage. And so we were partnered with a consultant, and so she really helped me flesh out this board agreement. And in it, it talks about the sort of power dynamics at play between a board and the staff of an organization, and how sometimes those things can there can be some friction there, and there can be some misunderstanding in terms of like what a board's role is. And we've had experiences of, you know, someone joining the board and being like, yay, I get to program exhibitions now. And it's like, no, like we need your help on a much more high level, you know, farther out thinking of our goals. And so being able to sort of talk about those dynamics and explicitly say that, you know, as a board member, you, when you are an individual at the organization, you are simply a volunteer. Like the power of the board comes from when they're all convening together, but then also making sure that board members realize that they shouldn't be asking the staff to do anything, because there is this implied level of power that then can make it a little bit confusing for the staff. Like, should I be doing this? Should I not be doing it? And sort of laying all of that out in terms of that really everything needs to come through the executive director in terms of the team. And then we also have created a sort of board manual, if you will. When I first started at Art League, which I'm similarly in my 15th year at Art League, starting in a program capacity and then transitioning into the ED role, there was just a dusty old binder that we would give people, and it weighed about 60 pounds, and it was a lot. And so we've sort of uploaded all of that into a Google Drive, and we try and have a file tree now and try and make it like as engaging as possible. I need to work on some icons because that sounds really good. But also baking into the responsibility piece, we really expect board members to attend at least 8 out of the 10 exhibition openings that we have, and sort of setting that expectation like right up front, because I think that's also a way to help them with engagement. And then another approach that I've used recently that I think has been really successful is finding board members that have nonprofit experience. And so one of our most recent board members, he used to be a CEO of a nonprofit organization, and he has been so great and transformational in terms of helping onboard other board members and helping them understand their role. And I'm totally all for like a lateral co-directorship type of setup. And so it just works really well because like they understand exactly what the board's role is, and they can sort of like help echo and support what, you know, I'm already saying to them as well. So
Thank you. You can pass it down to Debbie. All right. We're going to switch over to talking more about development and fundraising. So my first question here, because pretty much everyone here either is or has been on a board, and also a lot of you have been involved in grant making, so feel free to answer this from either side. What percentage of an organization's budget should come from grants? Like if you were a grantor, when you see this grant application come in, what gives you pause? And if you're applying for grants, what else do you do to raise money, and where are those boundaries? Well, I'll let you go first.
That is an impossible question because it depends on the organization so much, right? It depends on their structure and what they're doing and how big they are. So it's been a while since I looked at it. Someone sent me an application, by the way. So, but you would look at like what the ask was. I would look at what the ask was. And is this a one-time thing? Is it an ongoing thing? Like what is the, you know, I was going to say revenue mix. Sorry. What is the structure of support for the project? And does it look like it's, you know, healthy? Like it's reasonably healthy? Are the participation numbers there? Does it look like it's something that could be successful with some grant funding, right? Are there other people funding it? Does it, you know, show that there's like a little bit of community support for what is happening? If like they want, the ask is really big. It's like we want 100%. You fund 100% of this project. Well, does it fulfill a real need that seems to be missing in the community, right? So that's the funder side, the grant maker side, really kind of understanding what's happening in their space, in their community, or discipline that they work within. And then what was the other part of the question?
Oh, just from either side. You know, if you're a grant maker versus somebody applying for a grant, what's reasonable? And I know, of course, it depends on the organization.
Such a hard
but-
question.
Yeah, because some have earned income, which is another question for later.
Yeah, we'll
But-
get to that
yeah.
later. Yeah, so I think, I think just putting the ask in a way that really tells the story with the numbers, the budget numbers, and the participation numbers, to support your best case, and then tying it back to the need, the opportunity, the impact that you're having, and that you want to have, and what you need to do that is what you need to do that, financially. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so I've heard often this rule, it's a very random rule, that it shouldn't be more than 60%. But I think that, meaning grant money, right? And the rest should be earned revenue. But I think I agree with Debbie that that's very random. And it also depends, I think, on the age of the organization. I think if it's a very new organization, I think a grant maker, a grantor would feel a little bit more comfortable with the majority of the budget being, grant money. And less so with earned revenue. But I think as a organization matures, we're going to want to see, from a granting standpoint, again, here's that word, more diversity in the revenue streams. And we're also going to want to see, to Debbie's point, buy-in with the community. We want to see that the community is supporting this organization. So I actually think that needle changes a little bit as the organization gets larger and as time goes by. Because at the beginning, it's almost like a startup in some ways, where we're kind of funneling public funds into a new organization, a new idea, a new service. But as time goes on, we want to be able to see that there is more sustainable revenue sources. Once upon a time, before the 2008 crash, there was this sort of rule that every nonprofit had to zero out. You know what I mean? Whatever you brought in, it was what was going out. And at the end of the year, you're zeroing out. And a lot of grant makers looked at that to say oh, well, if they're making more money than they actually spent, then this is a problem. And then the crash happened. And I think the philosophy changed within the community and also with grant makers to say, hey, you know what? We want to see that there's some level of sustainability here. We want to see that organizations have more going on in terms of their revenue than just us, as just grant money or public funds. And so this notion that there might be a nest egg or there might be more money left over from year to year that gets rolled over to the following year is actually now a good thing. Right. So I think if there was a hard, fast rule, you want to, you want to have, as much, it's like, diversification in your portfolio kind of thing as possible. And you definitely, as your organization gets older, don't want to solely be dependent on grant money. Because as we know, the markets can change, the economy can change, and you want to be able to know that when those changes happen, you can pivot and change and have other kinds of revenue streams if you need to get you through those hard times and those changes.
Angela, how many grants does Fresh Arts apply for per year?
I was looking this up right before. And so I actually referenced the digital board guidebook for my pie graph to see what the percentage of grants are. Just kind of high right now, but mostly because at least this last year we're trying to do away with the gala at least for 1 year, which generally brought in about 20% of the organization's revenue. So we're trying to see if we don't spend time on a gala, what else can that do? So far it's at least keeping me sane. I'm I'm happier. But annually, I'd say we're heavily grant dependent. And so I was looking to see, and I think the range is about 10 to 16 grants a year.
That's a lot.
I'm very busy.
Are they repeated from year to year? It's the same 16, or do you feel like?
There's a good solid 10 that are from year to year.
Well, I'm scared to share my number now. So our budget is around 1.3, and so it's about 25% comes from our school, and then 25% comes from special events, And then we have 25% comes from grants, and then the rest is we have like a on-site coffee shop tenant, so we have earned revenue coming in that way, and a few other things such as membership. And then in terms of the number of grants that we apply for, it's about 25 throughout the year. I know, I was like, I didn't know if that was a lot or not. So, but yes. Well, I will say that, I've always been told that you should have like diverse revenue stream, because like if one source gets cut off, then you have basically a backup. And so it's a sustainability thing. And then also, I think just sort of like looking to the future, what I'm more excited and hopeful to see, or at least find, is like more general operating support, which means that the organization has agency to basically deploy those dollars as the organization sees fit, as opposed to having to like jump through all these hoops or it being restricted in some way. And then also individual donations. I think there's like flexibility with that. And I feel like in terms of grants, especially at a federal level, there's just getting more and more restrictions. And I think within the sort of like visual arts, performing arts world, like that sort of can lead to things like censorship, and there's so many strings attached. And so being able to prioritize individual fundraising, I think will just give us more agency to be able to fulfill our mission.
Do either of you, Angela and Jennie, have a lot of corporate donors, or primarily individual in that section of the pie chart?
We have some corporate donors that give from year to year for either programs or operating.
What do you do to engage them, and how did that happen for you? So,
board members. That's where board members absolutely are essential for making those connections and in helping to connect those dots between a corporation and what their funding priorities are, their community priorities, and where one of our programs might fit. But that is a piece of our pie that we are also looking at growing.
Yes, and corporate funding for us is 3%. So it's definitely an area for development. And I will say HEB has been incredibly supportive. And I feel like I see their logo on a lot of visual arts and performing arts organizations. And so they fund our community programs. And so they've just been incredible. But that's definitely an area that we can work on.
All right, Fleurette and Debbie. If you could give one piece of advice to people who are writing grants, what are the biggest issues that you see? What scares you the most? When you see this thing, you roll your eyes. Whatever it is, what are people doing
the deadline.
wrong?
And make your own internal deadline about 5 days before the real deadline. So I would say that's really important, because let's say the deadline is, April 30th. You should be telling everybody in your organization that's working on it, the deadline is April 25th, because something always happens. Someone's going to get sick. Something happens with the computer. Sometimes there's a glitch between you and the portal that you got to enter the grant into at the funders side of things. You never know. Hurricane Harvey, any of the hurricanes, an ice storm, so you always want to just think backwards. I always tell like my students, especially the performing arts students, but even visual arts students, it's like opening night. You know what I mean? You got to work backwards from opening night, and you want to give yourself as much buffer time to have your tech rehearsal and your dress rehearsal, whatever it is, whatever the metaphors are that you can use with their artists to tell them to get in front of that deadline, because you do not want to be scrambling and doing everything last minute. You want to know that it's in many days before and got a confirmation from the funder, and you're sitting pretty by the time that deadline comes and goes. The other thing that I would say is, and this is a skill, I think that grant writing is its own art form, to be honest, and you can really tell the difference as a funder, who is refining this art form and who's not, because it's writing, right? But what I would say is that a lot of our arts organizations do a really good job with the narrative side of the grant and less so with the numbers side of the grant. And what I would say is, like, obviously don't be afraid of the numbers, but do be aware that there should be a strong connection between those numbers that you show and the narrative. Like, if the narrative is telling me something different and I don't see it in the numbers, then it will throw me off, right? And so you really want to ask yourself, when you've written all of this great stuff and you've expressed it really well, is it reflecting in the budget numbers? You want to think of it as a mirror, it's what I tell my students, and go back and forth to say, if I talked about something in that narrative section, is there a number that reflects that? Or if I said something, I threw out a number in the narrative, is it the same number that I wrote in the budget? So those are the kinds of things you just want to be really clear about, is making sure that your budget side of the application is telling the same story as the narrative part of your application.
If you haven't done it, I would say serve on a grant panel. If you are on that side of it and reviewing applications, you're going to become such a better grant writer, like immediately after that panel. So that's like just free education for you, and you provide a good service.
And sometimes you do get paid.
And that's right. Sometimes you do get an honorarium. That's exactly right. So yeah, I would do that for sure. I would, the writing, like trying, let me see, I'm doing it right now. So see how I'm like, what am I going to say? Sometimes that comes through in the application. Like there's a lot of throat clearing, like, okay, we're talking about stuff. Where's the thing? And so, give yourself the time to kind of go through that process and refine and refine and refine, so you can be as concise as possible, right? You want to make a compelling, clear presentation in as few words as possible, and then you can go deeper if there's space, right? But lots of times they don't give you the space, so you really got to get it out there, and that's important because, again, somebody's going to be reading. I think still we have people reading. Lots of applications, and so you just kind of want to give it to them so they get it as quickly as possible. I don't think if there's anything. I don't think there's anything that really. Well, this isn't really something that put me off, but it would be like lots of times there'd be a lot of real estate in the application given to describing the problem. Like, oh, the problem. And it's like, okay, but what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Like, what is this grant asking to do? So I think that kind of sharpening of a lot of the writing can be really, really helpful. Like, you want to make it easy for someone to give you money.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on that. Houston Arts Alliance is always looking for grant panelists.
Yes.
They pay $300. It's very fun. I've done it a few times, so I'm just putting that out there if you haven't done it.
Commission for the Arts also
Houston Arts Alliance.
Often too.
We look for panelists.
And Mid-America, and be a grant panelist. It's fun, and you usually get paid in my experience. So.
And you know what, to that point, it's important to remember that it's not just a director of grants that's reading your application. It is often a panel, right, of all kinds of people. And so to Debbie's point, the clearer it is, the more sort of accessible your writing is. Think about the fact that the audience will be other artists, other leaders. I mean, that panel could consist of all kinds of people. So you want to speak as accessibly as possible in your application, right? Clarity of communication, I think, is really, really important when you're writing your grant.
I have a couple more questions for everybody. Okay. Angela can go next. So in general, I want to talk about development and who manages that at the organization. Do you have development directors? If you don't, who handles that? Do you think organizations should have a dedicated development director? How should that go? And Angela, I'll let you start.
Oh man, I wish I had a development director. You are looking at it. Wearer of many hats. I work with our team to try to divvy up. I'm trying to get better at delegating, and so I try to find pieces of the work that the team can connect with and own. I feel it's also helped them in their leadership and working in a nonprofit and having an understanding of what the grant side looks like. Someday they could be in my position, and it's helpful for them to know how much work is involved and how we need to stay in budget. And so no, I'm it. But I will say, for as far as grant writing, so Fresh Arts, we manage a fiscal sponsorship program, and so I read the applications that come through. And that has also helped me hone my skills. But I always start my grants and my advice for others in some of the workshops that I've taught. Start with the budget. Start with the budget. How much is this going to cost you? What are all of the things, whether it's people, equipment, artistic personnel, what are all the things? Like word vomit every element and associate a cost for it. You know, even if you're hoping to get it donated in kind, know all of the elements, have a budget, balance it, figure out how much you need to raise for it. And then when you're working on the narrative, go back and make sure that you are including all of those things within it. So for me, I always start with it. And it's also, for me, a couple years ago, I was on a panel for the NEA, and it was really interesting to see their process. It's a huge process. And they have a layperson, so someone who's not in the arts, who is with us, other arts administrators. And that layperson in our group was always going back to the budget. They started with the budget, and they were nitpicking the budget. And so for me, that was another okay, spend time on the budget. Make sure that a layperson who does not know how much things should cost or what is involved in a production, make sure they understand that. Was there another question?
Oh, you did. Development.
Yes, so that's something that we're definitely trying to increase capacity for. So when I first transitioned into the ED role, we ended up recruiting a part-time grant writer, and so that was really helpful because I find a lot of the time with grant writing is like reviewing the questions, like creating the systems which you can then go and input the content essentially. And then also being able to have like a fresh set of eyes on language, and then also bringing in the program team and making sure that they are having authorship on what is getting proposed. I think that's like such a key important element that I've seen it done not so great when, you know, sort of people that are just not boots on the ground are like coming up with ideas, and they're like, let's apply for this, and then they get it, and then they sort of like, surprise everyone, this is what we're going to be doing. So just making sure that it's a bit more like grassroots and making sure that they're part of that process. But because we have dreams of having a new facility and a capital campaign, we actually got a grant from Houston Endowment to increase our development capacity. So we have a consultant right now that we're working with who was a former CEO, and so she's building out a CRM for the first time in the organization's history, because essentially all the development work, which is done by me, is just in like 1,000 spreadsheets. So being able to sort of create systems in place for that, and then also warming up our donor network to really understand people's giving capacity ahead of, in a sort of feasibility process. And then actually in our new budget that was just confirmed, so our fiscal year goes from June 1st to May 31st, we actually put in for a full-time development person. So the goal is that we'd be hiring that person in the fall of this year. So I'm so excited. And so it's definitely on the horizon. But yes, when you're a small organization, you just end up sort of doing it all.
I want to say something about that. And I think what you both said is really key, which is that everybody who works in a nonprofit organization is a fundraiser in some capacity. And everyone needs to see themselves like that, whatever your title may be. You know, if you're a dean of a college, you are also a fundraiser. You know, whatever it is, if you're working in any capacity, especially, I mean, yeah, I think that everyone has to get familiar with the process of how the money comes through and how, you know, you apply for this money. And as you said, it's like a training ground because anybody could end up being the executive director. And I think that, you know, there has to be this sort of philosophy that even if you're not the person out there cultivating a donor or out there writing the grant, in the way you design your programs, in the way you execute your programs, in the way that you market your programs, in some form or fashion, it's a development process, right? It's a potential revenue generating or fundraising process. And I think that has to be, especially in small organizations where everybody has to come together and understand how to move the ship. I think that we need to really encourage that perspective in emerging leaders, because it's going to become more and more critical that everybody understands how the money comes in, how the money is used, how the money goes out, like what is that life cycle? And no one should feel like they're kind of on the periphery of that process. Everyone should feel invested, literally, in that process, I think. Yeah.
What was the question?
Thoughts on, should someone have a development director? Is that really important? Otherwise, who's doing it?
Well, it's a
You know.
tremendous luxury. I'll tell you that. That's right. And we all deserve luxury. So if you can't afford that, then I think it is about setting up some roles so it is shared among the team to the degree it can be. Maybe getting in the contract people, but when you have someone who that's their job, then they're the point and they can focus on it and they aren't pulled in all the directions. And not all grants have deadlines, and those are really easy to set aside because, I don't know, the water is leaking or whatever. Things are happening that you have to deal with. There are always things that come up. I think that a development professional is great. I think it's hard to find. I think it is hard to find the right fit. In a former life, I was able to make grants to organizations to hire development people, and the percentage that didn't work out on the first hire was really high. And it's almost like they hired someone and they're like, that's not what we need. And it took that hire, which is really, it's expensive, it's time intensive, you're not progressing the way you hope to be. So I think, really making sure what is it that the person needs to do? Are they writing grants? Is it individual giving? Are they working the fundraiser really as part of that? To try and find that skill set match is really important. But yeah, it's a tremendous thing to have if you can afford it.
All right, last question, and then we're going to go eat more cookies. So for everyone, Angela sort of brought this up, and I'm glad that you foreshadowed this. You mentioned you're not going to have a gala this year. You're going to try not to. So I'm just curious what you've seen trend-wise in the fundraising development universe, whether it's because of COVID or technology or just the world. What's different? Is there something new? Is there something that's outdated? What changes have you seen over your career in the fundraising universe?
Related to galas? Or
No, just in general.
anything?
That was just one thing that made me think about that.
So many things. And I do think the complexity, I feel like there's a lot more complexity now because there is opportunity, but with that opportunity comes different kind of contractual relationships where people, they're not just, we'd like to give you some money. It's like, we'd actually like to set this up as a service contract where you're working with us as delivering a service. Well, that's a totally different contract, legal, just accounting. It's like so many things come into it. So I feel like there's a lot around that. I think that we talked a little bit about corporate, and they are so much of corporate is about is this driving something that they're trying to achieve with their brand, right? HEB is probably a bit of an exception to that, but I think that you see that within a lot of corporations, they're looking for that alignment for their corporate goals.
Corporate responsibility.
Well, they're not. I don't know if they're allowed to do that anymore.
The departments are.
But yeah, and I think there's been this. There's new people coming in, and they're in new places. But then there are people like my age and older who are kind of stepping back a little bit. I think there was that big shift in COVID. People started doing other things. So they're not showing up for the programming as much, and they're maybe not then showing up with their money either when it comes to donations. So I think that there's been some shifting around. There's think that there's a lot of stress on like organizations right now in terms of all of these things we've been talking about. And so I think that it's, it's definitely like there was money that was pumped in at COVID, and that is gone. And now those stressors are showing up. And then there's like a lot of questions about the economy, like how people are feeling about that and responding to that, and the costs that are escalating astronomically. And so that affects us as trying to raise funds. Like we're all trying to raise funds, but it's also like a calculation for people about giving funds or buying a ticket or all of those things. So I think those changes have happened so fast that like being able to be connected with like a core audience, a reliable, I think that's harder now because there are so many things that are pulling people in other competition for their time. But I still think Houston loves a gala, y'all. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know. I'm thinking, I was like, you're my hero. Like, if I never have to run another gala in my life, I will die happy person. So, 100%. But man, it has been in Houston, and that might be different now, but it has been what people will show up for. And they want that table.
And I don't know, I think we maybe need to think about galas as not just fundraisers, but they're social events. There's just ways of bringing the community together. And if you can raise some money, great, but we know how much time it is and how much cost it is. And it's a lot to put on one of those big galas. And so if you maybe just changing the paradigm a bit to be like, if we make money, great, but it's not really what this is. It's about cultivation of whatever, relationships, community. I would say the biggest change these last few years. Gosh, I remember you and I were at a conference. It was a Grand Makers in the Arts. It was like 17 years ago. And these young dudes showed up from like Silicon Valley to talk about Kickstarter. And we were all like, what? Nobody knew what they were talking about. Well, it's just going to be called crowdfunding and and we were all like, what? And so I think that is, and I would love to hear from you all if we have time to hear if there's been success in that space. But I think that is still something we need to think about, is the sort of crowdfunding, online fundraising initiatives. I think this is another place where your advisory boards that include some young people who are tech savvy, social media savvy, understand how that space works, I think is going to be something we need to better capitalize on, I think. Because I don't know if a lot of our traditional nonprofit arts organizations are tapped into that in a way that could be lucrative for them. So I think that's probably one of the biggest changes that I've seen. It's just the utilization of the internet and tech.
I don't know what's trending. I know for us, Gala was just so hard. And in the last year that we hosted one last year, it just, post-COVID, the event just did not yield what it used to yield before COVID. Before COVID, I mean, they were doing great. They were very, very hard, but they were helping to pay the bills. And so it became worth it. And it just became an annual task of how do we make this really mission oriented? How do we make this fun, but how do we really connect with our donors? And then in the last couple of years, it just got to be where this is just hard. It's, people aren't coming, people aren't giving, or they're giving and then they're not coming. And then no one is there to bid on the auction. And you did all of this work for nothing. So, we're sort of sitting it out to see how can we better strategize and use our time. Some of the things right now that are working for me in having this extra time is being able to have more, to be more intentional with how I do engage with our past donors that have been there, whether or not they came to the gala or they just gave, or, that they've been there throughout the years and have weathered the storms with us. And reaching out to them and having honest conversations about where we're at in funding and what we're trying to do with our programs and how their donation can continue to make an impact. Even though there is not a reception, there's no event to come to other than would love for them to come to the program or to come have coffee with me and I can talk to them more about the program. And that for me has been successful. It's been successful and it's been really meaningful. And we've been able to cover program costs, for some of our smaller programs in full with these generous donors, and I feel good about the work. So I'm just hoping to continue to build upon that momentum and just try to do the good work and have people notice and want to be a part of it. But that said, our organization will be celebrating 25 years next year, so there will be something. I won't call it a gala, but there will be some sort of celebration with the party, and we will be asking for funding. So wish me well.
Some exciting things that I've seen other organizations do with galas is like move to a model where you only have a gala like once every 5 years or something. You know, when there's some sort of like landmark thing to celebrate. Art League, however, we are still having a gala every year, and we have one of our gala co-chairs here this evening, Daisy. Thank you for all your hard work. But a lot of our gala is sort of like a lot of our programming is baked into our gala, and so it's tied to our Texas Contemporary Archive. So we honor the Texas Artist of the Year, Lifetime Achievement in Visual Arts, and so there's sort of award ceremony portion. But it is interesting, and it is a question every year, do we still need to be doing this? And what is interesting is I feel like at our gala, I look around the room and I don't recognize half the people in the gala, and they don't come to our programming throughout the year, but they love coming to the gala. And so I think it's just something that we need to think about more long term for the sustainability of the organization, just because it is such a heavy lift with such a small team. And I think also having a new development person coming in the fall will be able to sort of alleviate some of that and help us with the special events. But other trends I've seen is just kind of how we think about fundraising. I think we were in a sort of scarcity mindset where we feel like there's only a certain amount, like different organizations feel like there's only a certain amount of money out there, and so we're all fighting over it, and there's like a level of competition. And I think that there's been sort of a push towards a more abundance kind of thinking and more of a community-centric approach, which I really like. And so it's like the phrase, rising tides float all boats. So it's like we're only successful if everyone is successful. And so I think that's something that Art League is really going to be focused on over the next 5 years, is figuring out how can we partner with other organizations like Fresh Arts or other organizations where maybe we could be doing events together, where we could be pooling funds in some way, and just working more collaboratively.
Well, thank you. That was super interesting, and I've learned so much from y'all. Before we go, I want to ask Fleurette's poll. How many of you has used Kickstarter or any other crowdfunding for your organizations? Okay, like 3. All right.
Would you do it again? Continue to do it?
Well, all right. $1 million crowdfunding.
So you just keep it rolling? It's like one continuous fundraiser, or you do a new initiative? Oh, it's all, so you do 24 hours, hit it hard, and then you do it again next year. Once a year, a 24-hour campaign. See?
Please coach me.
This is why we have to tap into this a little bit better. And I think that, again, the sort of Gen Z, and they to them it's just like getting the content up. This is another thing about media and video. Thanks. And sort of video and visual content, and how that can be leveraged in the online space to do, because more and more of those crowdfunding or whatever fundraising sites require content now too, in a way that they didn't 15 years ago. It's not enough just to describe what you're doing, but a really great compelling video, or a really great, so it's something that we need to get better at as a sector, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. So anyway, thank you everyone. Thank you Tala, Elisa, Ron, and Lisa for being here.